welcome to another weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. This week we heard from 5 witnesses, 2 of whom were ministers in Jammeh's government, one of them an army commander, another an orderly, Senator Sabali's orderly, and we understand we've been getting testimonies that these orderlies were some of the most brutal, who were essentially the foot soldiers of the tortures and the killings. So we expect to hear some interesting and revealing testimony from that witness. And finally, we heard from Kurosise's sister, one of the most eloquent witnesses, who gave one of the most poignant testimonies in the proceedings so far. So here to help me unpack and digest the testimonies are my usual suspects, Babukar Sise and Ansumana Esonyasi. Gentlemen, welcome to the weekly roundup.
Thank you.
Another week, another set of testimonies, and more interesting things to talk about. Sure. So, on Monday, the 4th session, this was the second week, isn't it, of the 4th session. Yep. So we had Njai Ponkal, Babukar Njai. We've been hearing that name throughout, and so we heard him finally. But it was interesting that in the beginning, he was quibbling over whether he was Ponkal. At first he said this was, he was at the TRRC, he began to hear himself being referred to as Ponkal. We went around that loop, but afterwards he accepted that he was Njai Ponkal. Asumana, you covered that. How did you see that?
Yes, I covered that. Thank you, Mr. Mboch. It's good to be back again on the TRRC Roundup. Babukar Njai's name has been adversely mentioned by several witnesses who've testified before the TRRC, and the main highlights of his testimony were the November 11 incident. In fact, before November 11, the July 22nd coup, November 11 incident, Senator Sabali's convoy, and also his eventual victimization. So these were the main highlights of his testimony.
Yes, let's just give a little bit of biographical detail. He was born in 1972 in Kaur, didn't he? And then he enlisted in the army in 1990. So where do we begin? 22nd July, or let's go straight to 11th of November and see where was he, what was he doing, how does he fit into the story that's emerging so far?
Well, for him, he said it was a few weeks after the July 22nd military takeover that he was called to the State House, and then he was directed to the office of the then Junta Vice Chairman, Senator Sabali. And it was when he met Senator Sabali that he was informed that he would be serving as one of his orderlies.
So he was handpicked.
He was handpicked
to be Senator Sabali's orderly,
by Sana,
or one of the orderlies.
Yes. And for him, he's attributed that to the fact that he used to be one of the standout performers, during exhibitions that were done by some of the recruits at the time, members of his team. So he was handpicked by Sana Sabali to serve as one of his orderlies, and it is him and JCB Mendy who were his 2 main orderlies at the time. So it all began on the 10th of November. He said they of course have a resident as well there, So Sana came there, forcefully opened the door while they were sleeping, and woke them and said, "You need to dress up," And so they dressed up, took their weapons with them, and then went with him to the State House. So it was when they arrived at the State House that they were briefed by Almamo Mane, and then they were all, some of them who came there without weapons were given new AK-47 rifles, and then. They asked if, apart because they were only there with the orderlies, then they asked if they could have some men volunteer, to go with them to the barracks. And then he said some men, within the State Guard, volunteered. And then he said they were around 47 in number when they were leaving the State House. And so they went to Union Barracks. But then on their way, Malafi Kaur, whose name have been also coming up a lot lately, suggested that they use the Abuko, route to the barracks, the back way, instead of using, the front gate, because it would alert, the alleged coupist. So they used the back gate to the barracks, and then Edward Singate, they had separated themselves into groups. So Edward Singate led one of the groups, and he volunteered to go into the barracks with his men to see if it was all safe and clear for the rest of the team to come in. Then he would fire 2 shots. So
but here he doesn't conjure up any sense of an ambush, because from the Abdullah Darbos and all of them, there was this sense that there was an ambush. But so he doesn't give
Most
us
of these
any
orderlies
image
never
of
mentioned the
there was
ambush.
an ambush. Okay, continue.
yeah, so he said when they went in, after Edu and his team went in, because he went with a couple of men, so they were there for about 30 minutes. I believe they were going around to see if everything was okay. Then they had 2 guns, to say, you're welcome, you can come in. That it was all safe and clear. So they went in, and he said when they went in, some of the guards who were there, so those around the sentry were disarmed, and they fixed in their own men, and then they were there up to around an hour. Then they saw a car coming in, and which would later, come to know that it was Lieutenant Basiru Barrow. So he said when this particular individual came in, but he said he was far, but he could see the car coming in, and then as soon as the individual, alighted, he was apprehended by Edward and some of his men who were, stationed at the gate.
So he said he was standing at a distance.
At a distance.
But he could still see
Yes.
Edward and his men arresting Barrow.
Okay. And then he said, there was this swarm of officers on Barrow, that he was being tortured and all of that. In fact, at first, he wasn't really saying he was being tortured. I mean, he was just saying there were many men, who jumped on him. He was apprehended. And then the lead counsel had to, the deputy lead counsel had to repeat this question 3 times. He stayed, he kind of stayed silent for a moment. Then he said, yes, he was being mercilessly tortured, and then he was brought in and stripped, naked, and then taken to the cells in the guards room. And then it was the same thing.
But he didn't take part in the beating.
No, he said he didn't take part. He said he was far.
Okay.
I mean, he was at a distance, but he could see what was happening.
All right.
And he said, in fact, at some point, he said he came close to Barrow to, in fact, just to see him, because there were so many men on him, and he couldn't really, from where he was, he couldn't have a proper view of what was happening, but he could tell that he was being tortured. And he said when he got close, he could hear Barrow saying, you're killing me, But then his voice was so low that you can hardly hear what he was saying. So,
and here it will be interesting, just before you continue, to contrast, for instance, what JCB Mendy said. He was there, he said he didn't see that nothing happened to Barrow.
Yes.
Remember, and even Senghor, I think Lamin Senghor as well said he didn't see anything, there was no hitting. Here is another person who was there, giving us an entirely different.
This man was at a distance.
One. Yes, he said
but
he
you
was
can
at
still
a
see.
Absolutely. Quite very interesting. And what,
Exactly.
Go on. So
yeah, I think the interesting highlight here would be the fact that we've heard from other witnesses that when Barrow was apprehended, almost all the others participated in torturing him. Now, he said he got close to Barrow. He went there out of curiosity. He just wanted to see what was really happening. Of course, we have heard from him before that, at a distance, he could see what was happening. Yet he went close because he was curious to really see what was happening. That's how he put it. But just to, going forward, he said they were there, and then when that file came in, he was also apprehended in a similar fashion, and then the others as well. But then he said after these people were apprehended, he said Sana had suggested that they should go to Fajara Barracks as well, which they did. Now, at Fajara Barracks too, he said they separated themselves into groups, and then they attacked the barracks. Some were shooting about sporadically, and, after a couple of minutes, they captured the barracks as well. They overpowered them. And there he said...
was there any resistance as such?
Well,
was there any organized resistance? So far? There doesn't seem to have been any.
Well, from his testimony, I don't think there was any form of organized
Yes.
resistance.
At
From
all.
all other
Because-
testimonies, I
There's
don't think
nothing.
there was an organized resistance
At
because
all.
according to one of the witnesses, they were firing back to slow down these people so that they can escape through Bakau.
Yeah.
And that's how. It was kind of a strategy that
Okay.
probably if we stay, they're going to kill us also. Let's fire back and then they will know there's resistance and they will run away. But
That's
it wasn't.
So no resistance, so they took
Yeah.
over the barracks. Then-
I think I mean, in addition to that, not only were they firing back, you know, to delay these people so they would escape, but I believe they must have been caught by surprise, you know, and that too could be one of the reasons. So after they overpowered them and captured the barracks as well, Fajara, you know, Sana had paraded. He said Sana paraded some of the officers who were arrested, and he was threatening them, you know, and saying so many things to them, but he can't recall what Sana was saying at the time. And then he said, you know, in the process of scaring them, he was just firing, you know, about and you know, he accidentally, as he put it, Sana had accidentally shot that fowl who fell, you know, and that also it was.
So he said Sana's shooting of Dotfal was accidental.
Was accidental because he was just
How-
shooting about to scare them, you know, and then he said it
But
was.
how would he know that? How would he know what was Sana's intention?
At the time.
Well, that is the
That's a bit curious,
that-
but let's go on. Let's move
that
on.
for me is the $1 million question anyway. But he said Basil Barrow also, it was during that time that he also fell to the ground because, of course, we know they were carried from Union Barracks after they were arrested there and taken to Fajara. So he said after that, some escaped. That was when some escaped.
Yes,
and
at Yundum,
yes.
we've been told that people like LF Jammeh, and there was
Sir
somebody
Jackal.
else,
Sir
Sir
Jackal.
Jackal, they escaped.
Yes, and he
All
said that was when Sana, you know, yelled at him and Tumbul Tamba and said, "Get them," for them to pursue those who were, trying to escape. So he said he went with Tumbul Tamba, you know, pursued these people, but then they couldn't trace them, you know, and he said after an hour, you know, they came back to the barracks, but then on their way coming, they met an officer who said he was from an overseas trip, you know, so he was reporting to work. It was, you know, the wee hours of the morning. So they said to him it wasn't safe. So he was advised not to go to the barracks because it wasn't safe. And then they said to him that was when, you know, he in fact told them that he understands the council members were at the barracks, but they have left. So when he said that to them, they said they want to go back to Union Barracks because they want to believe that this is where they went to. So he suggested that they go to his house. He has a car. He can drive them to the barracks, which they did, and then they went back to the barracks. So he said at the barracks, he was there when these people were arrested, and then after some hours, Sana and the other, you know, council members left for State House. Of course, we know that they did go to State House and came back before the others were executed. So he said when they went to the State House, after that was when Sana released him and said to him, "You can go home," because he sustained an injury on his arm when they were at Fajara Barracks, that he, you know, allegedly fell, you know, in a pit, and, you know, according to him. So he said he went home and did not report to work until on Monday. That was 3 days later.
Okay, so he was in part of the killings. Now we know that there were killings took place at
Yes.
Fajara. He said he was in part of that.
Yes, but again, at that point, he was shown testimonies of Alaji Kanyi, JCB Mendy, you know, and Sir Mendy, all
Said Dabo.
said Dabo, all mentioning his name and alleging that he was one of those officers who were present when those executions were happening at the barracks and also at Nyambai Forest and Sifo as well. But he's denied that, you know. He's just denied that and said he was home, he did not participate in these things, he was not present. Now, if you can also remember, when JCB Mendy was testifying, he also did say that Njai Ponkal was injured and he was excused by Sana, so he did not come until on Monday. That we've heard from JCB, but of course, we've also heard from 3 other witnesses. In fact,
So
4
now
other
the
witnesses,
the
who
situation
said
is
he was
quite,
there.
we've got conflicting testimonies here.
Mm.
So perhaps we need more testimonies to really be clearer of what
Yeah,
happened.
because he said he
Wasn't
is orderly to Sana Sabali. So obviously, if you are counting the orderlies, they will count him, even though he's not there and it's a long time. So, but again, one
said
said
that he
you are
was
not
injured.
there,
He was
3,
injured
4
that
said
day.
you are there. So,
But never mind that. So that's it. So we move on. I understand he was also asked questions on the torture of security detainees 6th of September.
Yes, at mile 2.
And yes, at mile 2. What did he say about that?
Well,
this was people like OJ
yeah.
and the civilians and life, wasn't it?
Well, for that one, he said he could remember, being told by Sana, it was at night, around 8, 9 p.m. when Sana said to them that they should dress up again. And then they did, so they boarded, his car. He said he could remember going with 2 other council members, Yankuba Ture and Sana Sabali, and then I think Sadibu met them somewhere around Westfield, and they all went together. So he said they thought they were going to the State House, only for them to branch off at mile 2. So he said when they went in, they were calling out names, and some of these detainees, were reluctant to come out, because at that point he was asked if he did participate in torturing any of the detainees in mile 2, but he's rejected that flatly. He's refuted those allegations, that these are just mere allegations against him. It's not true. Of course, he was there, and he admitted dragging one of the detainees. Now, at that point, he was shown Chongan's testimony, where he alleged that Njai Punkal had dragged him out of the cells and also participated in his torture. But then he said he, of course, knew Chongan even before that. And also when they were in prison, they became very close, and he also did facilitate Chongan's reconciliation with Sadibu Haidara and the others. But Chongan, he said, never wanted to reconcile with Sana Sabali, because it was Sana who brought them to mile 2. Now, at that moment when he was on Chongan's testimony, he kept on saying, no, I know Chongan. It wasn't Chongan that I dragged out of the cells, but I cannot recall who I dragged out of the cells.
So it might have been Chongan.
Well, if you cannot recall,
okay.
So but then he just kept on insisting that it wasn't Chongan.
Okay. So, but we've heard of the tortures that were meted out to these detainees. Yeah. So, well, his point was that he wasn't part of the torturers, or was he denying the tortures themselves?
No, he said
tortures happened.
Tortures did happen, but he
didn't participate. Yes. So this is becoming a regular pattern now. They wouldn't deny the occurrence of the tortures, but just deny their participation in it.
Yeah, and they choose just participating in slapping one person or kicking someone else.
Absolutely. You take the lesser charge.
Yes, the lesser charge.
I mean, it's quite, that's what one does. So they're gone. So what about the convoy? Because they've had a long list.
With the convoy, he accepted that Sana actually gave them a briefing, assembly, and said, if any driver or any car interrupts in front of them, let them bust the tires. He said Sana actually gave them that order, and they actually abided by that order, because according to him, he did bust the tires of certain drivers, and also he mentioned slapping one taxi driver at the Serekunda somewhere, Babu Fati Johnson, and he also accepted beating a driver that was at Serekunda police station that Sana sent and for them to bring. He said they took him to Sana's home and they tortured him, poured water on him, and he was...
Is it waterboarding? There's something they call waterboarding.
Good.
Yeah, he said they were just waterboarding him and he was jumping.
That's the Iraqi American style of getting information from detainees. He said he didn't accept in participating in that torture anyway.
So he conceded this
but it was like the drivers he slapped, and then the tires he bust, and then this driver they brought from Serekunda police station.
So eventually, what happened to him in the armed forces?
Yeah, after Sana was arrested, he said, in fact, the day Sana was arrested, he said he was in Sana's office. They were together, the two of them. And then Sana did tell him that they should be having a council meeting. But then he, instead of going upstairs where Jammeh's office was, that he was waiting for Sadibu to come, and then they go together, because we know they used to be very close. So he said while they were having, that chat, Sadibu walked in, and then he left with Sana. So he said he was there after a few minutes. He had noise outside, and then he tried to, go out, but then he was stopped by two officers who came, and they were with their rifles, and they stopped him. They said he has to sit down. They took his weapon from him, but in fact, he had this push and pull with them. In the end, he had to surrender his weapon because he knew one of the officers. So he said after a while, he said to them he was going out, and he forcefully went out. Then while he was standing at the corridor, he saw, this jeep that was going out, and Sana was in Sana and Sabali were, and Haidara were in there. They were handcuffed, and that was when he first, got to know what happened. That was when he knew what happened. And then he said he reported to work the following day, the 3 days later, which was on Monday, and then he was told that they would be going to the NIA headquarters for interrogation. They were taken there, but he said he was not tortured.
I think JCB mentioned the same thing. That they were taken to NIA.
He said in fact he went with JCB.
Yes.
So they took them there, and they were interrogated, but then he said they didn't torture them, they didn't do anything to them, only for them to be taken to Mile 2 after the interrogations, because they said to him that he wasn't, really cooperating with the interrogators. That they knew he was very close with Sana. So he must, at least they believe he must have been privy to one or two informations. That whatever Sana was up to. So he was taken to Mile 2, where he was for 2 years, but they said he was never tortured while in detention. But Sana and Sadibu, he did also confirm that they were being tortured while they were at Mile 2. And then he said when he was released, he was reinstated back into the army, just like JCB.
No charges brought against him.
No charges brought against him. So right now,
I think
he's still serving in the army, isn't he? He's still serving, even though he appeared without his uniform.
Yes, he came without uniform, but I think it was a kind of, for example, if you arrest someone, obviously, they've been going out with the odd list. Obviously, they've been all committing the same thing, and you don't know what the odd lists are up to. So obviously, it's a way of silencing the odd list as well. Keep them somewhere, because probably they believe they didn't do anything, but let's keep them somewhere for some time, tame them down, and then we can, let them amalgamate into the army again.
But see, with this testimony, the impression I got was, which now it is a pattern now. We got it from a JCB Mendy, from NSA, and from Senghor. It is quite interesting that they've been quite grudging in giving testimonies. Either they'll have lapses of memory, or I was in there a bit like Macavity the cat. He was never at the scene of the crime. You would hear his name around it, but he was never at the scene of the crime. So we've seen this pattern now, isn't it? Because these people who were there, who had a grandstand, if you like, view of what was going on, they were the orderlies, they were with the junta all the time. So far we've documented enough testimonies to have a clear picture of what was going on. But somehow they've been quite economical with the truth, it seems.
By concealing the truth, I don't think it helps, because like what this man said, I was at a distance, but I could see. Okay, why was he at a distance? You are there for a mission. Why are you far away from the mission? But also at the same time, I think if I'm standing here, 200 meters, I can see if they pounce on somebody and if they are beating somebody. I don't need to go even closer. I can tell that hands have been up and then the feet are moving and they are hitting at something. You can see that.
And when we take into account the whole idea, the whole raison d'etre of the TRRC, they wanted to come and confess the truth. Then the possibility of amnesty will come in. Then you can apply for that, and then reconciliation. In a sense, then it defeats the purpose, and it doesn't. It worsens their case. It's important for them to understand that the whole point of these things is to come and confess. That's the whole point.
For me, I think it's quite worrying to have alleged perpetrators come before the commission and like you said, claim that they were never present when some of these things were happening. You see, there are two things here. It's either you're concealing information. I think some of them are being economical with the truth, or they're dodging away from taking responsibility for whatever crimes they must have allegedly committed. Now, this is quite worrying, because most of them who would come before the commission and give controversial testimonies are people that have been adversely mentioned as alleged perpetrators. So I think it's quite worrying, really.
Let's go on to our next witness, Lamin Kababajo. He's currently the president of the Gambia Football Federation. He was born in 1964, he said, and enlisted in the gendarmerie in 1984. So by 1994, he was the commander of the Presidential Guards. Yes? Let's take it. 21st of July, when they came, what was it? Because obviously he traveled with the president, didn't he? So they came back.
Yes.
Does he confirm what happened? He heard that there was a disarming and all the rest of it. So let's just move on to 22nd of July. So 22nd of July in the morning, what happened?
He was at the State House. He said he reported to work very early as commander of the State Guard. And he said, he received this information quite early in the morning that there was a movement of soldiers at the barracks, at the Union barracks, and that some of them were well armed, that they were, coming towards Banjul. So he said he reinforced his men, but interestingly, they were not, being reinforced in terms of weaponry, but then he reinforced more men, and tried to strategize, as far as those positions, key positions were concerned, because he said his main, priority there was to protect the State House. Now, I found this quite puzzling how, you would reinforce more men but not give them weapons. I mean, it's quite puzzling anyway.
Yes, and perhaps even more bizarre, when the president and his family were evacuated, he didn't know anything about it. He was in the office.
He wasn't aware.
He wasn't aware of it.
And you can hear the lead counsel asking, you have to protect somebody, and you are not even aware. He could have been kidnapped, and he said, no, that was his duty. There are people and so. But then, again, the president left, and when he realized it, he said he went to join him and to see him.
For me, what I found quite interesting here is you're not aware that he's been evacuated, but within minutes, you were able to know where he was headed and you followed him. I mean, it's quite, I think it will raise eyebrows anyway.
So we'll just fast forward it a bit.
Yeah.
So he went to the frigate, to Lamore County. They went to Senegal, and there was Pasala Jang. So whatever happened, we've got a clear picture, a good picture of what's been happening. He went to Senegal, he returned.
On the 30th.
Yes, on the 30th he returned.
Yes.
He returned, well, Pasala Jang came earlier.
According to him, yes.
According to him.
Yes.
But it was very
arrested.
interesting that Pasala Jang was arrested.
I think Pasala Jang returned a night after they arrived in Dakar.
Yes.
Then he came back.
Yes.
But he was arrested.
Exactly. So you have all these senior officers who were being arrested and being detained. But for him, when he came, he saw the junta, he became a commissioner.
Yes.
Yes,
so with him, he became a commissioner.
The thing is, we've seen Kababajo, because what he, about when he mentioned about his scholarship issue, obviously, it means Jammeh stood for him somewhere at some point, and he really appreciated that.
Yes, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. The
there,
favors,
yes,
we'll come to that.
When he came back as well, he was appointed. But we heard what he said about Jammeh. He said, like it or not, he's a visionary leader. I mean, Jammeh stood up for him, and you can see him standing for Jammeh as well.
But that would come years later. This is the beginning. He's not quite sure yet. So now he's a commissioner.
Yes.
Yes. He served as commissioner until, wasn't it when he took over from...
After when Sadibou
was arrested.
Sadibou and Sana.
1995.
1995.
That's it. So here we're getting close to Koro.
Yes.
Koro's death.
Yes.
Because his testimony really touched on that, wasn't it, mainly?
Yes.
So Koro was murdered in June 1995. So he was appointed, was it January, March?
January.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's it. Tell us about the circumstances surrounding Koro and where he fits in. What did he do about it?
He was Interior Minister at the time, and he had accompanied the then chairman of the APRC, Jammeh, to Ethiopia to attend the OAU summit. Now, he said it all began at the airport. In fact, Koro was one of the ministers who were there, who went to the airport to see the president. And he said he also did confirm that the president have had these two, secret, long conversations with Edward Singate at the foot of the aircraft and at the door before they left.
So Edward had also gone up the stairs, to talk to the president, who was at the door just about to go in, which he said was unusual.
And quite
normal.
Not normal.
He said it was not normal at all.
All right.
And then
so they left?
They left. Now, of course, we know if it's a direct flight, it would take you 8.5 hours to get to Addis. And he said as soon as they arrive, barely 15 minutes after they arrive, one of the orderlies to the ex-president came into his hotel room and said the chairman want to have a word with everyone. So they all gathered in his room, and then it was where he broke this news to them that the finance minister, Koro Sisi, had died in a car crash. I mean, those were the words he used, car crash. And then he said after that, when they returned, he also did accompany the president to Koro's I mean,
that's it.
yeah.
But then again, in Addis Ababa, somebody else supposedly was there, Dembanjai, who was the chief of staff. According to Dembanjai, the president never mentioned Koro's name, not even once.
Yeah.
So that conflicts with Lamin Kababaja's testimony.
Yes.
Let's
in
move
fact,
on.
he was reminded of that, but then he's denied that.
Fine, that's all right. Then let's move on. Then next, when they went to Koro's house.
When they went to Koro's house, he said the family really were not happy with the junta and Jami, and in fact they were aware of that. But Jami had promised the family that they will not leave no stone unturned, you know. And he promised them that Koro's demise would be thoroughly and independently investigated. And whatever the outcome was, he would make sure it's implemented, whatever recommendations have been given. Or whoever was responsible for Koro's murder would face the full force of the law.
Absolutely, but in the end, he even considered that he was negligent in the investigations.
Yes.
Let's just take a look at this clip.
Yaya Jammeh deemed it necessary to assure the family, those are your words, to assure the family that this would be investigated.
Yes.
And here you are, as Minister of Interior, you were negligent in discharging your responsibilities. Those are your words, not
Yes.
mine.
Yes.
You accept responsibility that you were negligent.
Yes.
Okay. We want to know why you failed to do your job.
No, but as I said, maybe I could have done better, but maybe I couldn't do anything more. That was my limit.
In fact, this was a general malaise on the part of the entire system, not just you. This failure to do what was expected was a general malaise on the part of the entire system. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes. So he conceded to the negligence, but perhaps there's a lesser charge because we'll have another witness. We'll discuss the testimony of another witness who said that it wasn't just a simple case of negligence, but actually willful refusal.
Yeah.
So that will be quite interesting. So how did things unfold for him as a minister? What happened with, for instance, with the demonstrators?
Yeah.
Remember with the US, remember those who went to demonstrate. There was first the American embassy one, and then afterwards the UDP one. So what did he do? He was the Minister of Interior.
Well, he said he has no idea who arrested them, but as Minister of Interior, he did make several attempts to secure their release. But then unfortunately, as he puts it, that didn't materialize. So, but he's denied having anything to do with those demonstrators who were arrested at the time. And what I also found quite puzzling in his testimony was when he said Koro was like a brother to me. Yet he admitted being negligent in really not doing enough to investigate his murder.
He did say he instructed the then IG, Jibril
Juve.
Somebody
called
to investigate the matter.
Yes.
But he didn't
Who
get
said
any
that
feedback.
he never had any
Yes.
such
so
instruction.
there was kind of a contradiction there.
Juve said he never received any such contradiction. Okay, but it was quite interesting that those who were investigating it seriously, didn't we get, was it Pambai, the CMC?
Pambai.
Those who were investigating it, they were sacked.
Yes.
When they removed
Yes.
from it. Okay, so what happened with the UDP demonstrators there? As well, he said it was in his department.
Yeah.
He didn't know anything about it.
Said he has no idea who was behind their arrest. And that he also claimed he, like I said, made several attempts to secure their release, but that never happened. And then that was it.
Yes. And then what happened to him next? He was quite big in the APRC, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was campaign manager of the APRC,
Yeah.
and they brought to him about that biometric scam during the elections.
Yes.
When he was telling potential voters that the ID cards, the biometric,
they will
know whether you voted for them or not. And Usainu Dabo was objected to this very in the strongest possible terms.
Yeah, but he denied all those allegations.
Well, in the end, he said he wasn't sure whether he said it. He might have said it, but he can't remember whether he did.
That was when he was showing a copy of the Daily Observer newspaper in which the story was carried out at the time. Then he said well, I might have said that, but I can't recall ever making a statement like that.
And so, yeah, so he wasn't aware of any executions, he said.
No.
You know, be it November 11th and all of these things. And he was always quite eager to portray himself in a good light, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Always reaching out to some straw, reaching out to some anecdote, a straw of an anecdote to portray himself in good light, because really the evidence suggests otherwise. He didn't
at some
care.
point, in fact, he said, I am a very pious, sincere man.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember him saying that anyway.
Absolutely. And in the Daily Observer, he said that Jammeh was a visionary man. Then when I was listening, I said, you are quite an interesting judge of character.
Not only in the Daily Observer, even during his testimony. At some
yes.
point he said, hate him or like him, Jammeh is a visionary leader. He brought so much development to Gambia. And we were not just friends, we were like brothers. I remember him saying that.
Yes, I also remember, I heard that, and every word was so painful. It was like one pushing a dagger into my heart, because in many ways, he himself in many ways demonstrated that our institutions were in derelict shame, really. None of them did their work.
Quite.
They were like puppets, figureheads, or a cipher. There's this word cipher, zero. So anybody can just come and print anything they want on you. These were the props. And we historically we're beginning to understand that these are the sort of people who will prop any bad system. They will not say a word, very compliant, and they survived.
Well, to me, I think it's like two sides to a story. Despite the fact that a lot of atrocities happen, things happen, but also I don't want to blame Kababajo to that extent. I think when he meant some development, at least some development came to the country.
That's a different point. That's a political point. If we'll have to arrange, we will have to arrange political and economics. We'll have to arrange a discussion for that. So,
yes.
we'll move on to our next witness, Mustafa Marong.
Yes.
So he was the Attorney General. He was one time Attorney General and Minister of Justice. He was born in 1952, wasn't he? He had a law degree, went to Forebe College, and afterwards Maritime Law Institute, got his LLM, and vast experience, didn't he? I mean, worked as a social welfare officer, public prosecutor, state prosecutor, and senior state prosecutor, until he became Attorney General. So when Korosisa died, he was the Attorney General. Yes. So take us on with this story.
Marong was one of two civilians. I mean, one of the only two civilians, really, who.
It was he and Koro at the
and
time,
Koro,
wasn't
who
it?
would sit in
and they used to sit
meetings,
together. He said, okay, yes.
So for him, he said when he received news of Koro's death, he called Susan Wafa Ogo, then tourism minister, to ask why government was quiet over Koro's murder.
And he was first informed by Mbemba Tambedi, who was the Minister of Works at the time.
Yes, in fact, he said before that, just minutes before that, he spoke to Edward Singate, but he didn't make mention of anything like Koro or his death. So when he was informed of Koro's death, it came as a surprise to him, because, I mean, just minutes ago he was talking to the vice chairman, because then the president wasn't around, but he was around. So he found that quite disturbing, because for the vice chairman, to be privy to such information and not relay that information to the Attorney General, really tells a lot. So
there was an oddity. Then it raised the alarm bells.
Yes. In fact, he said when he put that to Susan August, he said to him, it's like, I mean, talking to Edu, asking him about Koro's death, it's like hitting your head against the wall.
Yeah.
So he said,
all you get is a headache.
Yes, he said at that point he didn't really understand what she meant. But then, after speaking to her, he called Edward, but then his wife picked and said Edward was busy. He said when he comes back, tell him I said he should return my call. And then moments later, Edward called back and said he was, engaged with something else. So then he asked about Koro. That was when Edward said to him that the pathologist had requested that no announcement be made, until after a post-mortem is conducted on Koro's remains. Now he found that quite disturbing. Which was quite. Because already
it didn't make sense.
Yeah, because already, I mean, Radio Senegal had announced that Koro was dead, and that he died, in a very suspicious way, really, because they said he died in a car crash, yet his car, his remains were burned to ashes. Now, he said he couldn't really comprehend that, and
he did mention to Edward that he suspects foul play.
Foul play, yes.
He did mention that to him,
So
but he said Edward wasn't.
He said he did go to Koro's family house, and you know, to commiserate with the family, and really even the people who were there to mourn with the family, some who came to pay their respects or attend the burial, really were telling
Koro's father.
members
He
to
said he
their
met
face.
Koro's father, and Koro's father even told him he suspects foul play in his son's death.
Yeah.
Yes, and the lack of investigations. There was no coroner's inquest in these things. All of these things should
According
happen.
to him, Koro's death was
all
not
the
taken
rest of it.
heavily. He said it was like a normal thing, like just it wasn't discussed at government level or in parliament. It was just like, you know, the case was just left to die.
But doesn't he say somewhere that at
was
some
only
point he
once.
came in,
At
that's
some
it,
point.
Lamin Badger, and when Jammeh said to Lamin Badger, proceed with the case quietly.
Quietly, yes.
Yes, he didn't mention
He
that.
said that.
Yes.
Even though Lamin Badger disagreed with that.
Yes, he said
that
also
didn't
at one
happen.
point, Jammeh did mention the case, but he said it was an act of God. It was God's will.
Yes.
And I remember he said they were asked at that point, you know, whether they had something to say. The cabinet ministers were there, but they all stayed silent.
Absolutely. So from Dabo, really, we got the sense that really institutionally there were really no investigations, and he could see how this junta was operating. That was why he even alluded to that l'état c'est moi. I am the state, that Louis XIV thing, so it's a saying attributed to Louis XIV, who ruled, was it in the 18th century? I think he finished in 17 something in France. So that was it. This is what we were dealing with, people who thought that they were the state.
Yeah, and also he, you know, boldly accused the junta of killing Koro. He said, the junta killed Koro, that I am convinced they killed Koro. And he also linked Koro's murder to the $35 million loan, you know, which was negotiated for the junta by Ibu Jallow then. So,
yes,
yeah.
and apparently there was 5 million, and it was shared among them, 100,000 each. Lamin Kababaja said that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So we still need more testimonies for us here to be clear of what's going on. Let's go on next to Yabajan Sise. Jaite, Babakar, you covered that one.
Oh, yeah.
Koro's sister.
Yeah.
So this one, for the first time, we've been hearing about Koro for a long time, but never had any biographical details. We really didn't know anything about the man, not even when he was born. We only knew that he was advisor to President Jammeh and then Minister of Finance. So let's just take a look at this clip, so you know, we'll have a little bit of his biographical details.
Osman was born March 10th, 1962 to Saini Sise and Fatoumata Sanya. And I believe they lived in Pakalinde, Brikama, and then moved to Dipakunda, where Usman went to Serakunda Primary School. After he passed his common entrance, he went to Gambia High School up to the 6th form. Then from Gambia High School, Usman went to Legon University in Ghana. After completing his bachelor's degree, Usman came home briefly before he proceeded to Australia to do his master's degree. Usman was a fine gentleman, a combination of both mom and dad, very loving, very disciplined, humble, hardworking. Usman believed in youth information, and he also believed in the power that youths have to transform any place if given the opportunity. So he was our role model. He was very smart, very welcoming, and he's always smiling.
We have heard a little about his signature smile. Can you tell us a little bit about what he studied? You said he went to the University of Legon. Do you remember what he studied and when he graduated?
I believe he studied agroeconomics in Ghana, and if I can recall, he graduated, but he proceeded to Australia where he had his master's in economics.
So they're bright, educated, you know, the best, representing the best of Gambia, really. So that's it. So he joins them. Dambanjai said that he introduced Koro to the junta.
Yes.
Because of really the wonderful person and brilliant person that he was. Joined them in what, March, wasn't it?
It was in sometime in 1995.
95, wasn't it, in March, around March or so?
Yes.
By June he was dead. Tell us how.
Well, it's interesting because when he joined them, according to the sister, he was first advisor to the then chairman, Jammeh, but he didn't stay long in that position, and he was moved to finance minister. So obviously, as finance minister, again, the sister revealed that when Koro was appointed, they were not happy. Family members were worried, skeptical about working with the military at the time. But Koro was all along assuring them that everything will be okay. And then the sister went on to mention one day when she found Koro and the mother discussing, and this just popping, and then the mother actually told her that Koro said Edward had threatened to kill him. You know, so we didn't get the reason why, but then that's what the sister said. And then a few days later again, the sister said she received a note from one Ablai Bojang, you know, a prison guard, and then the letter came from Captain Kambi, who was the sister's husband at the time. Again, telling the sister to warn Koro to be careful of Edward Singate because he is brutal and dangerous.
So the signs were quite ominous even before the killing.
Yes. The
so when was the last time she saw her brother?
Well, it was a day before. Well, it was the last time she saw was on the 22nd of June.
Yeah.
When Koro closed from work, he would often go by the house, and he went there, and then they have a chat. He left, and he said, I'll come tomorrow. And that tomorrow was 23rd June, when Jammeh was going to Addis Ababa, and then he accompanied. Obviously, Koro was at the airport accompanying Jammeh to Addis Ababa. But in his way, he said, Koro called and said, I'll be at home from the airport, and then make some nanbur for me, you know, when I come, because that's one of his favorite. And then that was it. Not seen, not heard it anymore.
Until 1 o'clock, they went to bed the following day.
The following day in the morning, anonymous telephone calls coming into the house. When they pick, no one is speaking. And then until around 1 p.m. when the auntie called and told them that, you know, she's got information Koro had an accident. And then the sister also mounted her own investigation, start calling, you know, Brikama, Banjul, Yundum. And then she got the news from Yundum that Koro had an accident, the vehicle has been burnt, Koro is dead, and the body is charred. And then from there, she went to RVH, you know, to see the body. Actually, the mother collapsed at home, fainted, unconscious. And then the sister was very strong. And then she stood up and then went to RVH to see the body with a family member. And then when they got in there, I said he went in, saw the body of Koro, couldn't recognize that this is really Koro. The head was not part of the body. It was in a bag or a rice bag lying somewhere. When she looked into the bag, it's like she saw something like a human skull, but it doesn't resemble a human skull. So she was not even saw that was Koro. But then that's what happened, and then they left home. I think 2 days later, it was the burial.
And the burial. But in the meanwhile, they also heard rumors circulating that Edward, Peter, and Yang killed their brother.
Because, you know, when they went to visit the mother actually told them, you killed my son, you dare to come here. And
so let's go to the burial. So the burial, of course, the junta went.
Yeah, you know, they refused state burial in the first place.
Yes. They had gone previously to ask the family for the state burial. The family declined.
Exactly.
Categorically.
Yeah. So obviously they were there at the burial, but then, you know, the youth there were actually want to control the burial, not the military, and then that's what happened. There was a bit of a scuffle there, according to the sister, but then the youth, actually controlled the burial because obviously they were all suspects, the junta members, so they couldn't trust them again. You know, so the burial was done. He said a Gambian flag was put on top of the wrapper that her mom gave her. So then the burial happened. From the burial, that was the time when Edward and Yankuba Ture, is it? Yes. They went to their house to pay their condolence. And this was the time that Edward actually went to the mom and then shook her hand and said, accept my sympathy. And obviously the mom was furious. And then looked at Edward and said, you dare to kill my son and come here to pay your respect, you know? And then he said at that point, you know, Edward actually pull out an envelope. I don't know why somebody should tell you that, and at the same time, it's also giving something. He pulled out an envelope, and according to her, it appears there's money in the envelope. So, and gave it to the mom.
Put it on the mat?
Yeah, under the mat.
The mom took it and threw it at the entourage, and that was it.
And then that was
so
it.
they left.
They left, yeah.
Yes.
And then at some point, she said, Jammeh also came there with Kababajo. And then when they get there, and then, Jammeh said, promised them that he's going to investigate the death of Koro, thoroughly. And then they were waiting for the investigations. When Jammeh left, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
And
that's it. Until a day after the 40-day charity.
Exactly.
Amia Bajan,
that was on the
witness.
1st of August, 1995. She booked an
she
appointment and went to see Jammeh.
For feedback and update.
And then again, Kababajo led them to Jammeh. And then when they met Jammeh, she said the first question she asked was, why do you kill my brother? And Jammeh said, no, we did not kill your brother. We will not do that. And Jammeh blamed the PPP, the Jawara regime, for killing the brother.
Isn't that a matter of clutching at straws? When you're drowning, you have to clutch at straws. That was what Jammeh was doing, really.
Yeah, he said, and then they talk about it again, and Jammeh said he's going to get back to them. And when they were leaving, he gave them some money. And obviously that money wasn't appreciated at
Absolutely.
all.
I mean, she was reluctant to take it, but the aunt apparently said, let's take it because, she was being diplomatic.
Well,
that's the word they used.
She knew that money would put them in trouble.
So when they went home, though, the family didn't like it. They took all the money and gave it out to charity to the masjid.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was no feedback, nothing been going on. No. So what happened to the family afterwards?
Well, the family, were devastated. No information was coming about Koro, and they feel that they need to relocate for the sake of the family. They are not happy. They are still in the same environment, and they made some arrangements, and then that's how they all left for the United States of America, and that's where they are. And then again, sadly, both parents died in the same year, 2014. I think the dad died first, and then later on the mom also passed away, and they all died with the hope that one day Koro will
be back. And before that, because especially with mom, she gave us this picture of mom and Koro. It's like a mom and son. I mean, given the only son at that. Koro was, and mom, Koro was the confidant, and mom was the favorite cheerleader. They were like best friends. Apparently, when Koro died, mom lost her best friend.
Yes.
That was really very, very touching.
It was sad, especially at the point when she said she went to the accident scene and saw a rib, and brought it from the accident scene. And when she gave that mom, even in that sadness, the mom actually got some consolation and said, "At least I've got something from my son."
From my son.
It's a very sad moment.
Yeah. And apparently, when Jammeh went to pay his respects, he took out a handkerchief, and he was pretending to wipe a tear. I call it the crocodile tear. That was just quite unbelievable.
Yeah, he said Jammeh actually pulled out a handkerchief and was wiping, his face. But he said Jammeh was in a somber mood.
Yes.
I wonder how they had to go that extent, go to the family just a day after.
And knowing very well what you did.
After murdering someone.
What's the difference? What's different from what people we are seeing at the TRRC?
Yeah. And more interestingly, though, as well here, this was quite interesting, particularly with Lamin Kababajo, what Lamin Kababajo said, that immediately when they got to Addis Ababa, 15 minutes or so after, Jammeh had spoken to them. But here the family wouldn't hear from the government officially until Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
So one doesn't understand, why not send somebody? Well, these are just odd.
It was obvious they went to the family, but if they didn't go there, it will be even more obvious.
Anyway, we move on to our, we don't have much time, we move on to our last witness, Babukar Jatta. He was the army commander in what was he in 1992, 1994 rather. What was he in 1992? Who covered Babukar?
No, he covered Babukar Jatta.
Yes. He was quite
interesting character, controversial testimony. Now,
let's go straight to November 11th.
Yes, he was army commander.
Yes.
November 11, he said he was picked up at his house by JCB Mendy. He went to join them at Union Barracks.
Yes.
And then it was when he was in the armory to see if everything was intact that he had gone outside. And when he came out, really, this was when no, that was the second time.
This was at Fajara, wasn't it?
Fajara.
That's it, at
Yundum, when he said when he came in, he was told by Sana that Barrow had been apprehended already. And then that was when Sana also showed him a list, you know, of people, officers who were going to be executed if they had succeeded in the alleged coup plot. Now he said it was the council members and him. You know, his name was also, last on the list. So he said, in fact, I was surprised that my name was there. Why me? This was what he said during his testimony. Now he said at that point he requested that they bring out Barrow. He wanted to talk to Barrow. And he said Barrow was brought out. Then he asked him, he said, Barrow, what is this? He was at that point asked, was Barrow tortured? What was his condition? How was he like? And then he said, he was okay. Then the lead counsel said, okay. He said, well, it's obvious he was beaten. And while, you know, I was there talking to him, I could see that his mouth was swollen. And then he said, whatever was in that mouth wasn't okay. This was how he said it. And then he said, while he was talking to him, Barrow said to him, please help me. You know, they're killing me, please help me. And then Sana punched him and pushed him, you know. Then he was taken back to the cells again.
But also in the list that Sana showed him, he said all the rest, their names were written in black. But his name was written with a blue pen.
Yes.
So supposedly this was the list. If the coup had succeeded, the purported planners of November 11th, if they had succeeded, that was the list that they were going to execute.
But why
and
was
his name was part of it.
Now, but why would they write his? Why would they add his name on that list if he was really?
So the events at Jundum happened, and perhaps the first inconsistency there with JCB Mendy. It was JCB Mendy actually who went to get him, didn't he? JCB said he went to get him before the shooting, whereas he said that he came well after the shooting. Okay, fine. So they go to Fajara Barracks. Yes. So at Fajara Barracks, what happened?
At Fajara Barracks, he said, because remember we've heard from previous witnesses that there was the shootout, and so he said it
wasn't really a shootout. Well, it was really one party shooting at others.
Yes.
At least with a shootout, you expect the other party to shoot you back.
So,
but this was just
so
a
he
massacre.
said he was in the armory, you know, trying to rearrange, you know, the weapons there when he had gunshots outside. So as soon as he came out, he saw Sana lining up, you know, some of the officers who were arrested, detained there. He saw them lined up, and there was this extended line of council members and the orderlies, you know, and Sana was just shooting about, sporadically, like of course we've heard from other witnesses, like the Punkal said. But then he said only 2 officers he could remember fell, some escaped. He did not participate in the shootings, and then he did not even stand on the extended line. He said when he got there, he stood behind them, and he was telling Sana stop.
Even though so many names, so many names have put him there, lining up.
And also officers. At that point, he was showing Mahfuji's testimony. Of course, we've also heard from Mahfuji, where he said Babakar Jatta was on the line, but he could remember someone saying, Allah stop, Allah stop, Akayanta, and he thinks, oh, if his memory serves him well, that must have been Babakar Jatta's voice. So, you know, of course, we know he maybe might have said something like that, but whether he was on that extended line or not is what we cannot, you know.
Well, Akayanta actually means something has already been done.
It's enough
and then it's enough now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Akayanta, that's what it means. That means it has
that.
already been done. Akayanta sign. So you could be part of the group and say Akayanta, or you could be part of the group.
So he said from there, when they went back to Union Barracks, he actually had said to the commander of the camp that I am going to my house. If the council members come back, that was when they left for State House. If they come back, call me so that I will come, because these people are up to no good, according to him.
Yes.
Anyway, so, but we've heard from previous witnesses that he went with the council members to State House before they came back. But he said he went home, and that it was later that he was called, you know.
Would you go to the forest? Was he at the forest
Well,
when they were executing them?
Yes, he said he was called. When he got back to the barracks, they were there. But Sana and the others were there, and they were in Mufti. You know, he said he had no weapon with him. He was also in Mufti.
He was at the barracks at the executions,
at the barracks.
but he was in Mufti.
In
he
fact,
had no
he
weapon
said,
with him.
because in his statement, he said Sana asked him to join them, so they would go to the barracks. But when he was testifying, he said he had pleaded with Sana that he wanted to go with them to the forest. All right?
Because he said he wanted to save his men.
Yes.
He wanted to
He
talk
said
to
he
Sana
wanted
so that
to talk
those
to
people
Sana
can be spared.
so he would save
but
his men.
it didn't materialize.
He was just very interesting, wasn't it? His testimony, I find the whole testimony. In certain moments, he wanted to, assert that he was a commander, he cared about his soldiers and all of that. Yet he was present when all of these atrocities were taking place. He didn't make any move. It is just the contradiction between what he was saying and the reality that took place was just quite astounding as far as I was concerned. And he digressed a lot.
Yeah.
With his testimony. He could never really focus with the matter at hand. He always had to bring in extraneous material.
Yes.
Yes. He was quite imperious in his manner. Even at one point, he questioned the expertise of the council, who had to remind him that actually his area of his expertise is in law of war. So he came across as quite cosset, quite gruff. I just couldn't.
Well, a lot of people. I have been following it up in YouTube and Facebook, and you can see the comments. People were not that happy with him because it's like, I think I saw somebody who made a comment and said he was a commander in the army, and obviously he thought he's a commander at the TRRC, and we can see his that happening where he will tell SFL, listen to me. And if Esa says something, he said, well, that's what you want me to say. And kind of, it wasn't, and for the first time, the chairman has to intervene. We've never seen that happening there,
Absolutely.
So the cooperation was actually...
we don't have now much time. Absolutely. I understand that he's going to come back. He will come back to testify in other themes of
April 10th
and the junglers.
And the junglers.
And the junglers and the like. Yeah. But one curious incident that happened this time, the chairman, the emotion, when Yabajan this was an incidental curiosity, incidental interest, that didn't know that the chairman's mom, Yabajan, was named after the chairman's mom.
Yes.
And then, and he also was in the same class as Yabajan's mom at Yundum.
Yeah.
Yes. So the whole emotion of the moment got the better of the chairman, and
I think it was towards the end.
It was quite touching.
That he realized that there was this family connection, and he really used to be very close to Koro's mom. So you can see how close, how closely knit we are as a country. Even the chairman never knew that he was really that close to Koro, and then it all came up when Yabajan was testifying. But again, I was going to say this quickly regarding Babukar Jatta. I think he was a hostile witness, but his demeanor really, for me, wasn't called for. Given the level that he got to in the army, his achievements in the army, given the kind of atrocities he's been alleged to have, participated in committing, I think he should have really comported himself. I think his behavior really was quite disappointing.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I mean, we've come to the end. I mean, all these testimonies is just quite fascinating. I think in the 1950s, the former British Prime Minister said that there was a wind of change blowing throughout the continent. In 1994, I think we had a wind of change, but this wind was a kind of hellish wind, and we're still suffering the bloody, nasty stench of it. We'll continue to hear the testimonies, gentlemen, and still let's keep our calm. Some of these things can be quite infuriating, yet we must keep our calm. This is about truth, reconciliation, and rest of it. So we have to be mature, but yet we must go through all the testimonies. Thank you very much, viewers, and my listeners our listeners on Q Radio 103.3. Hope to see you next week. So the TRC wouldn't be sitting on Monday. It's Easter Monday, so the next sitting is on Tuesday. Bye-bye.